radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. Yeah. Today's Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this. Man, that's right. I announced this yesterday. I'm going to announce it again. You've got to check it out. The new Fade to Black official Fade or Not t-shirts have arrived. Click on the links below. Go check them out. Artwork hand-drawn by Michael Oming. Go check it out. The links are below. Help support the show. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. You can do it two ways. Order it off the website. Get a Game Changer membership. The links are below. And shipping is included. What more do you want from me? Yeah, they're awesome shirts. Go check them out. The links are below. Tonight, right here on Fade to Black, one of our favorite guests, good friend, Fade or Not, Riz Virk is here. And we have been talking about, well, Riz, yes, but guests and the Fade or Nots. Everybody's talking about, are we living in a simulation, right? Are we living in a video game? Well, here's the deal. Riz, MIT, Stanford grad, all of that stuff, brainiac, right? Written a lot of books about this subject. Speaks about it a lot, but he's also a game developer and investor. He knows what's going on. So when he says something like, hey, man, it could be just like the Matrix, you need to stop and listen. We're going to be talking about that tonight. We're going to talk about the science of science fiction, quantum computers, quantum physics, computer technology, and all of that stuff. We're going to be maybe even dipping our toes into Eastern and Western mysticism. We're going to be doing all of that. He is a graduate of MIT and Stanford. He is, he's an investor. He's a successful business person. He's a venture capitalist. He's a computer scientist. He was the founder of Play Labs at MIT. He's currently doing a PhD and teaching classes right now. I don't even know where he is in the country. He's got a private jet. He's winging it. He told me today he's at a secret location. We'll find out where he is right now. He's a best-selling author. He has written books like The Simulation Hypothesis. An MIT computer scientist shows why AI, quantum physics, and Eastern mystics agree we are in a video game. That's right. He has invested in a lot of startups, including Discord, Theta Labs, Upland, and Tapjoy. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only. That's a heck of an intro, Riz.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Can you live up to all of that?
I don't know. That's a lot to live up to, right?
Yeah.
for the most part, it's accurate. Yeah.
I'm a hype man.
No private jet, but otherwise it's accurate.
I had to throw that in. Here's the thing with you, Riz. We've known each other for a long time. And I remember the first time that we met, specifically, and you'll recall this, you came up to me, it was about 10 years ago. You came up to me at a conference and you said, man, I'm watching you. I'm paying attention. And you introduced yourself and you talked about MIT and what you were doing at that time and teaching classes and the future of AI. And we talked for about 15 minutes that day. And it was right after that, started, doing shows and everything else. And we've been friends ever since. And I just want to thank you for that. It's been a long journey with the two of us.
Yeah, it has, and it's been a pleasure. And I think that was at the Conscious Life Expo, if I remember correctly.
I do believe so.
Yeah.
It was in front of my booth. Yeah, that's right. That's
where it was. Yeah.
yep. That's
Yeah,
where it was.
and I haven't attended, I don't think since, but I will be there this next year in 2024. So
Yeah,
we'll
you're
be
going to be
speaking on the simulation hypothesis and and
very,
Eastern mysticism.
very excited about that. I was speaking to Serena earlier today. She goes, "I'm so excited. Riz is going to be on the show. She loves you." And I am going to be with Q and Serena and Christine this Friday. We've got a little lunch meeting thing, and the lunch part is cool. It's at a very, very cool place, but it's intense, man. That's a big conference. And it's people don't understand. We're doing Stairway to the Stars in Las Vegas in November at the Luxor, and going through what I'm going through with Adrian, my partner in this venture, and it puts a whole new light on when you do things like this big. I mean, it's big. It's wow, what a challenge.
It's a lot of work to put those conferences on, and I think sometimes when we attend or even speak, we don't necessarily appreciate all the work that goes on. And I haven't been to as many lately, just because I've been focused on the academic stuff. But
right. Can we talk movies for a second? I know that what we're going to be talking about tonight, and it's going to be deep, and we're going to circle around to that. But you also have you invest, you like to produce, and you're a very creative mind, and I dig that part of you. And there's two movies I want to bring up. One, The Knights of Badassdom. And when you and I first met, that has always been one of my favorite movies, and I've seen it so many times. I didn't know that you were one of the executive producers on that film until you told me. And I was like, wait, you did that, right? And
well, if you look at the very end of the movie, the first set of credits you see is executive producers Peter Dinklage and myself, right?
Yeah, right.
First, yeah.
Peter Dinklage, for Game of Thrones, and he's the star of the movie, or one of the stars, I should say. But it's how did you get involved in a project like that? I mean, how does that cross your path?
Well, I got involved in films as kind of an interesting side hobby. I guess I have a lot of hobbies on the side, which is why I end up doing so many things. And my bio looks a little bloated sometimes, but I actually got involved with a film that had a UFO theme years ago called Thrive: What on Earth
That's
Will
right.
It Take? With Foster Gamble and Kimberly Gamble. And that was one of the very first films that I got involved in, more on the business side than on the creative side at that point. I was also helped out with Sirius, which had, Dr. Stephen Greer, and it had the little Atacama, which
Mommy.
we thought,
yes.
we thought was an alien. And so I had been a little bit involved with, independent films. Like, I haven't been too involved in the Hollywood studios themselves, but mostly with independent films. And it was through that channel. I mean, we used to have a group called Film Angels up here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so within Silicon Valley, there's this model of how startups get funded. There's the venture capitalists who typically provide like the bigger funding, but then usually you have these group of people who have been entrepreneurs, or maybe who were like executives who worked at Google at the beginning. And so they call them angel investors. And so they put in, smaller amounts of money to help projects get off the ground. And so I think that was probably, how I found out about it. But I was involved a little more, again, on the business side of Knights of Badassdom than so much on the creative side at that point. Now I'm involved. So, for example, I'm working with a group. We're trying to put together a simulation hypothesis docu-series, a little bit like Ancient Aliens, but, a little smaller. And so we're starting, conversations networks and other places to try to bring something like that out. But as you know, I'm a big fan of science fiction as well, and so I've talked a lot about synchronicity. I'll tell you what happened with Knights of Badassdom. It's about LARPing, if people haven't seen it yet, and if you're into Dungeons and Dragons or live action role playing, where people put on the costumes and they go out and they play. It's a really fun film about that. And so I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved or not. And so I was sitting at a Starbucks in Mountain View, which is just about a mile down the road from Google. And I did what I often do, which is let me look for a synchronicity or a sign that says whether I should get involved with this project. And it was a Friday evening. I think my girlfriend was away in Boston, so I was here by myself. So I was just sitting at the Starbucks. And what happens within like half an hour of my saying, hey, I'd like to get a clue or a synchronicity from the universe, then a whole bunch of costume role players who walk in to the Starbucks. And I had lived in Mountain View for many years. I had never seen that before. And so I took that as a clue that this might be an interesting path, for me to take.
And was it what you expected? Because, and this is why I'm bringing it up. The last time you were on the show, you brought up the 13th floor.
Yes.
Okay. After that show that night, I went. It's in my library, right? So I watched it again, and I missed so much in that movie. And after our show, which we were discussing parallel worlds and these possibilities and things, the multiverse, and I forgot how great the movie is, number one, and number two, how accurate it is where we are today. It's not a new film. That film's been out for probably almost 20 years. It
came out in 1999, in the same year as The Matrix, and unfortunately, it got kind of overshadowed by The Matrix. But I think you might have asked me this, and people ask me this all the time. What's your favorite simulation-themed movie? And as much as I like The Matrix, I think The 13th Floor is a better representation of where and how our technology is developing, and it gets at some of the core issues.
It's a trip, man. That movie is a bona fide trip. So let me tell you what happened. So it's 24 hours later, and I'm getting ready for bed. Now I always, dial up something, and I went, man, I want to watch The 13th Floor again. And I did. So I did it 2 nights in a row, back to back, just picking up on the little stuff. And I highly recommend it. We know about The Matrix. I've seen it 50 times. I have taken The Matrix. I used to, I still have copies of it. I would transcribe the dialogue and memorize it. Yeah.
You were pretty hardcore about it.
I was hardcore. Right? We were all into the movie. And I would memorize scenes, and I would type it out like a script, like a screenplay, and go at it.
Okay, Jimmy. Before we go any further, since you've done that with so many scenes from The Matrix, what's your favorite scene?
I like the interrogation scene.
I see.
We've had our eyes on you for quite some time now.
Mr. Anderson, right?
Yeah. You help your landlady take out the garbage. That's the best scene. Yeah. So that scene with the agent. But anyway, so when you take something like The 13th Floor, you are watching the movie for other reasons. There's the entertainment value, but there's the technical side of it too as well, right?
Yeah, so there's like 3 different levels, I guess, when I'm watching something like The 13th Floor. And the first is the entertainment value, just because it's a fun movie to watch. And the first time I watch a movie, it's usually, that's why. And then the second time I watch it, it's to try to get at some of the more interesting philosophical questions. So, for example, I'm teaching the first class that I know of at an accredited university in the US that is about the simulation hypothesis, right? And the subtitle of the class is the title is Simulation Theory, Science Fiction, Technology, Religion, and Philosophy, right? And that's about as, interdisciplinary of a class as you can have, because we're like basically touching all this stuff. And the 13th floor is, along with the Matrix, is one of the key pieces of science fiction that I have folks in the class watch, and then they have to analyze certain issues around what does it mean for AI to be conscious? How would you react? How does the AI within that react? What's the difference between an NPC and an RPG, which is like a role-playing game version of the simulation hypothesis? So there's like so much just around the philosophy and what it means for our future technology development. The whole idea of the ancestor simulation, right? So if you look online for around simulation hypothesis, the term was coined by Nick Bostrom in 2003 in his paper, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? And one of the terms he introduced was an ancestor simulation, which is that we would be simulating our ancestors. So like if we had a simulation of ancient Rome. And in the 13th floor, you have a pretty good representation of an ancestor simulation, because I mean, the movie's 20 years old, so I don't think I'm giving it away here, right? But they're in the 1990s, and they create this world, like a holographic simulated video game like world that is the 1940s in Los Angeles. I think we're 37, something like that. It's around that time. And that is an example of an ancestor simulation. And then they go in and then they take over the bodies so that the characters are both non-player characters, NPCs, as well as avatars of the person who, decides to go. Now, we don't have that technology yet, but I think the 13th floor is a great way, to think about it. And then there's the other level, which is thinking of it as a filmmaker, also as an adaptation. So by the way, that movie is an adaptation of a TV show in Germany called World on a Wire, which is an adaptation of a science fiction novel from the 1960s called Simulacron 3, by a guy named Daniel Galouye. I think it was like 1965 or something like that. And they changed a bit, right, when they made between the different adaptations. But it's interesting to look at what they thought a simulation might be used for. In the books, it was just to simulate market research to see what people would do, if they introduced new products, which was taken out of the movies. And the movie was more of a noir, type of film where they were trying to solve a murder, which was in the book as well. There were just extra layers, as is typical, I think, when a book is adapted into a movie. And I've been through that process a few times. It doesn't always bear fruit. I was involved in an adaptation of a Philip K. Dick novel, a lesser one known, called Radio Free Albemuth, which was one of the novels he wrote in his later era. And then also we were trying to adapt a book from Ursula K. Le Guin, and that one I was really involved in, with the script, giving suggestions early on and being kind of more of a hands-on producer. Whereas usually an executive producer means you're less involved with the creative side and you're more involved with the business side.
Radio Free was one of his, well, you said lesser known. Okay. It was also one of his better stories. And the ideas behind it, think about where we are today with UFOs and contact and ET, and go back and check Philip K. Dick, who also, okay, all right, let's stop right there. Let's pump the brakes. Let's stop on Philip Dick for a second. His presentation that he did, and I think it was in France.
Yeah, Metz, France, in 1977 at the South
1977. 1977. 40 years ago, man. 40 years ago. He's got a translator. He's right. So he's speaking a sentence at a time, and the translator is speaking in French, right? And now I'm paraphrasing here. I'm going to, I'm not. I can't do it justice, but this is what he says. The look on the audience too, by the way, right? Their faces. So he goes, well, we could all be living in a simulation. This is not real.
I'll give you the exact line, Jimmy. Right?
Give me. Well, okay. Give me the exact line, and I will do an audience member's face. Do the line.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed. Some alteration occurs in our reality. That was the famous line that people, and I think you got the face right there.
Right. And they pan out to the audience, and everybody is the translator, right? So he's speaking in English. Half the crowd gets it. Translator does it, and man, it was like an ice pick in the forehead. They were stunned. And
people can find this video online. They can check it out. And that speech has a lot more to it than just that. In fact, I ended up going back. So I interviewed Tessa, who his wife, and I think I might have even heard her first on one of your shows, Jimmy. But I interviewed her during the time I was writing the simulation hypothesis, and then that line is famous, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But when I interviewed her, she talked about how he came to believe there were actually multiple timelines operating at the same time, in the sense that like the World War II epic that he wrote, which is Man in the High Castle, which is about where the Japanese and the Germans won World War II. He came to believe that was a real timeline. Right?
That was a real timeline. And he said, and I don't know if Tessa told me this, but it might have been Tessa. She said that he would go on these walks. Okay. And I want to get this correct. If I'm wrong on this, because maybe she said it, and I've done a few different interviews and I've talked to her, right? But so I may not have this exact, but there was an alley next to their house, and he would walk down that alley and like get downloads, right? And he would come back, she said, after these walks, and with these, this parallel world, Man in the High Castle simulation conversation was coming out of him. And
and in fact, he, even in that speech, he said that when he wrote the novel, it was based on fragmentary memories, but then later he downloaded the full memories of what that timeline was. And so, I asked her, well, when he's doing these downloads, what's going on? And she said, sometimes it's like he's interacting with these entities that are controlling the simulation. She didn't call them aliens necessarily. And I asked her, could you see these? She goes, well, not exactly, but she gave me the impression she could see kind of a weird shimmering or something, right? And they even told them at one point, so this speech is important because the speech ties to, his ideas about the simulation, but also how things change. Like, how did that timeline get unwound? Somebody or something had to say, okay, that timeline is not leading to the result we want. So let's go back and change a variable, and we will run it again. And that's actually what he was talking about. If you keep going with the speech,
yes.
After that, he says that you would be hearing the same words. You would have a feeling of deja vu, as if you've lived this before. And he was of the opinion deja vu, it comes from us reliving the same moment. Like perhaps, Jimmy, you and I had this conversation once before, and we're like doing it again. And so, that was all about changing the variables. And she says that whatever these entities were told him that they also changed the timeline where JFK got assassinated in Dallas. But the problem was he got assassinated in Orlando that timeline, or they kept changing things and he got assassinated somewhere else, or it led to a really bad outcome like a nuclear war. And so they went back to that timeline where he got assassinated in Dallas. And to me, that was quite interesting. But
now, how I've got four questions. How would this be possible? Number one. Number two, why is it that so many very intelligent, bright, feet on the ground, coherent, clear-headed, successful people believe this? How, when, and to take it to the next level, to where you move from a pretty cool science fiction idea or the Philip K. Dick presentation, and you get into this thought experiment. How do you move from that into Elon Musk going, well, I'm pretty, yeah, I think we're living in a simulation. How do we get from that to that?
Well, I'll tell you how it happened for me. We've probably talked about this before, but after I sold my last video game company, I was trying on a virtual reality headset at a startup that was in Marin County across from San Francisco, and they had a beautiful view of the bay and the skyline of SF. But instead of admiring the skyline, I was trying out, their new game on the VR headset, and it was a ping pong game. And so I put on the headset, and back then, and this is more than 5 years ago now, that was a bulky thing. I mean, even today's headsets are bulky, but that was really big. There were wires coming from the ceiling. I mean, you're in virtual reality, but I started to play this ping pong game, and it felt so realistic for a while that for an instant, my brain forgot that I was in virtual reality. So much so that I tried to put the paddle down on the table, and I tried to lean against the table. And of course, there was no table. It was just in the VR headset. And so what happened is the controller fell to the floor, and then, I almost fell over. And that's when I started to think, we're getting close to this point that I call the simulation point. So it's a theoretical point. It's like a technological singularity, right, where we can create simulations that are indistinguishable from physical reality. We're not there yet. So that was the start of part of my reason for going down this rabbit hole. Was I laid out the stages of technology, and there were like 10 with AI, VR, BCIs, all this stuff. And we're about halfway there. We're getting even a little bit closer than halfway now to the simulation point. But so the argument goes, and this is what Bostrom said and what Elon Musk refers to. So Elon Musk has a famous quote, people can find it online, where he said the chances that we are in base reality, okay, meaning the chances that we're not in a simulation, the chances that we're not in a simulation is 1 in billions, okay, which means the chances that we are in a reality is billions to 1, right? Mm-hmm. Which means it's highly likely. And the reason he thinks that is, for similar reasons to what I'm talking about, is if video games continue to improve at the rate they are now, faster, so it doesn't matter. Suppose they continue to improve for 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years. Okay, imagine how immersive the games will be in the future. Because even 10 today,
10 years, yeah,
10
years,
they'll be immersive. But imagine a civilization that was 100 years ahead of us in their game development, or 500 years. Their games would be completely indistinguishable from physical reality, because we think we're going to get there. And so the argument was, if a civilization ever gets there, it's going to create a whole bunch of these simulations, right? Because if you simulate something, you don't create just one. You might want to simulate the weather. You don't just have one. You change the variables and you rerun. You change the variables and you rerun. And that's part of what you do in a simulation or the pandemic or whatever, right? You're trying to simulate something. And so they would have potentially thousands or millions of these simulations. And within those, they would have billions of simulated beings, or what we call NPCs now. And basically that means that if you are a being in a world, are you more likely to be a simulated one? Remember, there's millions of worlds with billions of beings. Or are you more likely to be in the physical world, which may have a lot? There's only one of those. And so statistically, it's more likely you're in one of these, because there's a lot of them, than one of these. But the basic point is that if anyone can ever get there, then it's already possible someone's already gotten there. And we're inside that simulation, and we just can't tell.
No, we can't tell. We can't tell. And here, this is to your point. I want everybody to just stop for a second and think about what I am going to say. Okay, it's this simple. 5 years from now, forget about 50. Kids playing video games individually. The video games are running on their computer, and they are in this virtual reality playing the game. out from that are 10 million kids playing the same video game. All right. But their reality is individual on the computers. That right there is the multiverse. That idea, that the very framework of what we are talking about is that. And that's today's technology right now.
That's not even even like 100 years from now, right?
No, that's right now. That's right now. And so when we're talking about, well, is it possible? What do you mean? Is it possible? We're doing it. We're doing it.
And the way video games work is, you render on your device and everybody else renders on their device. And so if you're standing next to each other inside Fortnite or inside Roblox or whatever, World of Warcraft, you think you're in the same place, but you may not be.
You're not.
They're being rendered different. Just like Jimmy, I'm not really talking to you right now, am I? I am talking to my computer, which is translating my voice into bits, and that is playing on your computer. So you think you're seeing me, but people may have seen this on Zoom where you can change the background. That's pretty common. But you can now start to have avatars and you can change. So you think you're in a shared reality, but you're really in a reality that gets rendered for each person. And that is the device. People say,
that's what I'm
what
saying.
Is the simulation?
That's the crazy part when we're talking about the multiverse. If you just think about it in those terms, that's exactly where we are right now. And I wanted to one comment. A couple of years, I can't get into specifics, okay, and please respect that. But I was shown some proprietary VR software and headset technology. Okay. So I go and I get a demo. Okay. I'm not going to get into specifics because I signed off on all of that. So I can't. But so I enter this world and I got this proprietary headset on. I've got some gloves or something in my hands.
Haptic gloves.
I'm not getting into specifics, but I have devices on my hands. Right. Okay. And I enter this world. They videotaped me, by the way. Okay. All right. So I saw the videotape. It's pretty embarrassing. And but anyway, so I go and I do this whole thing. And just like you, when I took off the headset, it took me a minute. It did. I mean, it was like, oh, I'm back on terra firma. Okay, I'm back in base reality right now. Wow. And it was like that. It was a very strange sensation, and to see where the technology is. It's incredible.
And that's like VR headset. Now imagine if you go even forward to what I call stage 7 and 8, which is brain computer interfaces, where the signals actually being beamed into your brain. So now it's not a matter of 10 million computers, it's 10 million brains, each rendering a version of the reality. And that's where things get, quite interesting and complicated at that point, because now you really do end up in a very, very immersive type of world. So, this is where it ties to, you may have seen Rick and Morty. Have you ever seen any of the episodes of that show?
I've seen every episode.
Okay, you've seen more than me, but some of the ones about simulations are the ones that I've seen. And there's one where there's a video game called Roy, or Life Well Lived, and the guy puts on the headset and he's suddenly a baby, right? And he's becoming Roy, and he goes to school and he graduates and he gets married and he has a business and he has kids. And at the age of 52, he falls over while getting something on the top shelf and he dies. And then suddenly it says game over, right? And then he takes off the headset and he's like, wait, what's going on here? Only 15 minutes have passed. He's like, where's my wife? Where's my kids? Right? Where's my job? None of this is here. And that is the type of immersion that we're talking about. And in fact, I was just in the UK, earlier this summer, and I was speaking at a conference about Islamic theology and jurisprudence, right? Which seems like a weird place for me to be speaking as a technology guy. And they were debating like we do here in the U.S., like when does the fetus have a soul? What's allowed? What's not? And I said, well, let me offer you an alternative definition of ensoulment, right? Because that was the word they were using, is when does the soul, if there is one, when does it interact with the body? And I said, well, ensoulment I will define differently as when you put on the headset in such a way that you can no longer remember, right, what was we were doing before. It's what the Greeks called, the river of forgetfulness that you have to cross when you go into an incarnation. And so, that is a key part of what the mystical traditions and really all the world's religions, have been telling us. And, I just wrote a book called Wisdom of a Yogi. We can talk about that later, but it's about Eastern mysticism and how it relates to the simulation idea, particularly in the Indian yogic traditions.
Have you, you want to talk Hollywood? You've seen Black Mirror?
Yeah, I've seen Black Mirror. Right? I don't think I've seen every episode, but I've seen most of them at this point.
Okay, the one the simulation episode about Star Trek.
Well, there's a few simulation episodes, but yeah, I do remember that one about Star Trek.
Okay, right? that was Bizarro. And if you think about how that ends, he's in his chair, right, in his living room. He's got the interfaces, right, on his glued to his temples, and he gets stuck in a spaceship, right? He's out in space all by himself and gets abandoned while in the simulation. And that's how the episode ends. He's in his chair. He doesn't know that they what's the word when you have they mutinied, right? His employees mutinied on him and turned the game around on him. He was a video game developer, right? And would play the video game in his office, where he would go in and manipulate all of the employees. That he was number one at the company, but he was treated like he was number two, or he was a partner, right? And so, and in the end, but anyway, that's exactly what we're talking about here. And for him, if we get to the point where the brain computer interface, which is, I'm sure it's reality at Google, I'm sure it's a reality at DARPA. Elon's got his thing going on, Neuralink. So I'm sure that the Chinese and Israel, they've all got versions of this going on right now. There's no question about it. But what kind of psychosis do we need to prepare for when you're coming in and out of these simulated realities? Where the desire to be in there and not out in the real world, because in there it's perfect or whatever, right? What kind of psychosis do we need to prepare for?
Well, the definition of a singularity, most people think it's about AI, which it is. In its original definition, it was when computers either got networked or AI became super intelligent, or we had computers in our head. They're like different ways to get there. But the idea is there's a point of no return. Once you get to that point, the technology accelerates, and then everything is different for humanity because of the technology. And so that's why I call the simulation point a kind of technological singularity, right? Because it involves AI as well, because you have AI characters in the simulation that may or may not know that they're simulated as well. And that's also one of the stages. And in that Black Mirror episode, the Star Trek one, he would make copies of, right, the individual.
The DNA. He did it with DNA.
That's right. He used the DNA to create AI versions, right, of his employees, particularly the cute women that he liked, right? So there's this sort of, weird situation going on here. and then he could live out his fantasy of being captain of, whatever the ship was, not the Enterprise.
And he held them captive. And they knew it too.
Right.
That was the other part. That was such a bizarre episode. Yeah.
And that's not the only Black Mirror bizarre episode about simulations. Have you seen the recent one with Salma Hayek?
Yes. Oh, dude, that is so good.
Yeah,
that is so good.
Joan is awful, and you start off with this one actress. I forget her name, but
her
life.
Yeah, her assistant. Oh my God.
Yeah. So there's an AI version of Salma Hayek that is playing her in kind of a Netflix, they call it Streamberry type series, mimicking her every move. And then she goes off and does some very crazy things. We're not on radio, right? So we can say what she does. I think she defecates in a church or something in order. And so the Salma Hayek AI does the same thing, right? And then the Salma Hayek in her reality gets pissed. Why did you have me do this? And tries to break out and say, stop this. Turns out they are also AI that is replicating something that's happening in another world. So there are these like multiple simulated worlds going on with AI.
That was turned into a TV show in real time.
That's right. Yeah, it was a reality TV show.
It was a reality TV show. Yeah. Oh man, that was
quantum computers. So they brought in the quantum computing idea.
That's right.
How could this?
And you know what? Okay, hold on. Too many tangents here. Let's back up for a second. The ideas that are presented in stuff like this, where the AI version is something that is now a part of our world. And I have AI. I think we're way ahead of our skis. Okay. Now, I'm going to say we have a mutual friend. I can't say who it is because this company is developing some stuff. Okay. So I can't get into that, but they tested it on me. Okay. Right. Okay. So I get this text, and the text says, I can't give away too much. I'm going to get in trouble. But the text says something like, I'm going to be very generic. Hi, I am so-and-so, and I am the assistant for blah, blah, blah. And it looks like it's just a normal text, right? And I need to give you a call. Are you available? And I said, yes. My phone rings. Dude, I typed text. Phone rings. Pick it up. Hi, Jimmy. I'm just going to make this up. Hi, Jimmy. This is Sarah. And I'm just calling to check in. And is there anything specific that you need to work on with this project? And I'm listening. I'm like, yeah, there is actually. I do have a question. Okay, what is it? That fast? Well, blah, blah, blah. And I say whatever it is. I need a delivery at 10 p.m. tomorrow. Okay. Will that get everything done? Yes. Okay. So we'll get that handled. I stopped. This is AI. Holy crap. I was talking. Riz, I thought it was a real person. The inflections, the way, the whole thing had me from the text to this, and it's in development right now. And I'm telling you, I didn't know that. I did not know.
Yeah, and a few years ago there was something called Google Duplex, which I'm sure they've developed a lot more now. And at the time, it could make calls to make appointments for you, right? And like if I needed a haircut or something, it would call. And what was happening is they added these realistic pauses and ums into what the AI was saying, to the point where people who were getting the phone calls didn't know that it was an AI. And so they self-regulated by saying they're going to identify, right, themselves as an AI. And I think this is one of the interesting, rules or predicaments that we get into with AI, with generative AI, with ChatGPT. Right. I mean, I'm in academia now, and you have students who we'll get ChatGPT to write their thing for them, and it's still you can kind of tell that something is off about this, right? But they don't say it's from ChatGPT, and that's a big no-no in academia, where you're supposed to reference where you got stuff from. So you can use ChatGPT as long as you say ChatGPT says this, right? Otherwise, you're presenting it as if you said that. But with all the images that can be created now, right? And one of the issues in that Black Mirror episode that I talked about was, what do you do with these digital versions of these actors? And in fact, the Hollywood strike, right, that's going on now, that's one of the issues. Actually, who knows, maybe it's been resolved, but it was going on certainly, this last month. One of the big issues was, who gets to control those AI characters? Who has the final say on what they do? Does the studios? Does the actor? Who do they have to pay royalties for each of the, for each performance? But identifying AI, I mean, that's a big issue already, and people wrote stuff to try to detect if this was ChatGPT or not, but then it just gets better and better, right? So each time you write some algorithm to try to figure that out, and so right now, the only solution we have is some kind of self-regulation, where the people who create these things will self-identify, right, that this is in fact an AI. Now, when you start taking the AI, the language models and the chatbot, and you combine it with either voice, which is what you heard, right? It was a voice. You didn't see the person. But if you combine it with an avatar, like inside a video game, then you get what looks like a real, smart NPC. And there was one called Kuki.ai, Kuki.ai, which was based on the old chatbot that inspired the movie Her. I don't know if you've seen that movie Her.
Mm-hmm.
That was inspired by a chatbot. I think it was called Alice or something, and that got incorporated into Kuki.ai. And basically, the creators of Kuki decided they were going to use something specific called heterochromia, where you have different colors in the eyes between one eye and the other, which is, a real condition, but they use that as a marker to say, if you see an avatar inside a video game that is, that has heterochromia, or in this specific case for that specific character, that is one way to identify that this is an AI. But that's just something they did themselves, right? So it's not regulated at all. And that's already becoming a big issue. That's why, book creators and others are suing OpenAI to say, you're training on all of our data without asking us, right? So there's a whole bunch of legal issues now that come into it, even before we get to the big philosophical issues down the road. Can you fall in love with an AI, right? There's companies now where, they provide you with an AI companion you can talk to. So what we saw in Her is already starting to become reality. And you can choose if it's like a romantic AI or it's like a friend AI.
Buddy, yeah, buddy. It's gotten so good. I don't think that not only this audience but the rest of the world, I don't think they really have a grasp yet as to how good it is and what you have seen that you don't know. And already, and you don't know. So when the strike happened, this is okay. So back up about a month before the strike. Okay, about a month before the strike, a new TV series launches on one of the streaming platforms, and I'd been waiting for it, and I watched the first 3 episodes. Okay, I was a week behind, so they did the 2-episode premiere plus the next week, right? So there's 3 episodes up, and I bang them out, right? I binge them. The strike happens, and I went back and I caught like half of the 4th episode when the strike happened, and I see the TV series that I don't want to say what it was. The TV series is mentioned in the strike notes specifically, and then there was this thing on Reddit. So I go and I read the thread, and the thread said, here's an example. There is a scene in blah, 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 where the star of the series is AI. He's not getting paid for that scene. They went back, recut the scene, used AI instead of paying him to come in, right? Go through makeup, right? Limousine picks him up at his house. He gets the pages. He does the script. They bring in the camera, lights, sound stage, and they do it. No, instead of that, they did it in AI. And so anyway, I'm reading this, and that is a legitimate concern. I agree. But this is what I did. I was like, that wasn't AI. I just watched it. So I go back to the scene that they're debating or they're talking about in Reddit. I go back to that scene and I watch it. I said, no, it's not AI. They're wrong. They're wrong. It's not AI. That was real. And so, and I finish it, and I go back and I was reading. I went, wait a minute. Holy crap. I got fooled. You understand what I'm saying? I went through.
You were sure it wasn't AI.
I was all upset. I was ready to start posting in Reddit. Right? You guys are wrong. You guys are arguing about the wrong game. That was real. That was it. That was the real actor. There's nothing to see. I caught myself. That's how good it is, Riz. I didn't know.
It's gotten really good in the last few years because, people still think, like, if you think of like when they inserted Princess Leia digitally, right, into one of the Star Wars movies, I think after Carrie Fisher had passed away, right, it was still kind of hokey. You can kind of tell, right, and then they put Luke Skywalker back in the Mandalorian at the end of the first season or second season.
Yeah.
Finale, right? I mean, you could still kind of tell because his face didn't move quite right. It was definitely a de-aged version of Mark Hamill, but it was passable, but still pretty noticeable that that's not real.
What was the movie with Joe Pesci and De Niro?
Joe Pesci, Goodfellas, the old one?
No. It just came out. The Irishman, what was it called? Where they all de-aged themselves. They shot the film, right, 2 years ago, but right. they that was not that good, right?
Yeah, and even Harrison Ford de-aged in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It just came out. You can still kind of tell, and it's also you can tell that it's like Harrison Ford, an 80-year-old actor, is playing this guy who looks like he's de-aged, but it's getting pretty good. And so
it is
depending on what they're doing. But the Hollywood actors are more concerned with royalties, but this is an issue that goes beyond royalties, right? Royalties is who gets paid for what. The question is, how do we know what's real and what's not? And I think that gets to the bigger philosophical issues where if all our interactions are virtual anyway, right, how are we going to know whether we're interacting with real people? What if I'm an AI and you're talking to me? How would you know, right? It's getting so good. It's not quite there yet, I think. But it can work in a film because you've got like these scenes which are scripted. So you can kind of tweak the AI and keep doing it over and over again until it looks realistic. But in a real-time conversation, that's harder to do, right? The whole problem with the Turing test is not that AI can't fool you once. It can fool you usually for a couple of sentences, right? Or even ChatGPT can kind of fool you. But if you do it long enough, something gives right now. But eventually in the next 5, 10 years, maybe 20 years, right, we'll get to the point where it's just going to be flawless, right? And that's when I think, these bigger issues come out to play. And that's what, ties back to the sci-fi we've been talking about all along, right? That's when you start to say, okay, what's simulated and what's not, and are we inside, some kind of a reality?
Well, here's the rub. All right, I understand both sides in this, in the writers and actors strikes. Right, I understand both sides. I understand the movie side. I understand the production side. I understand the union side. I totally get it. I see both sides. But here's the danger. If you're an actor and you want to push, right? You want a little pushback. You got a signed contract with the studio. So maybe you don't want to come out of your trailer for 20 minutes, right? You want to make your stand with the director. and your agent has got your back, all of that. You need to really think about things, because the studios, and it's always been this way, everybody can get replaced. Everybody. You can get fired off a movie and they'll bring in another actor. You know what's worse? They bring in another version of you. Right? Go ahead,
Right.
stay in the trailer. We'll fix this in post, right?
Yeah, and that AI does things that you might not do, right?
Would never
there's
do.
the whole nudity clauses, or
Yes!
this is exactly what happened with Salma
Yes,
Hayek in the Black Mirror episode, right?
Yes, that's exactly. I would have never said that. That's your fault. Right?
The AI had no problem. But what happens? Okay, so I wrote an article for CNN on this, and they ended up not publishing it because it was a little too, I think, philosophical for their site. But I said, well, okay, that's one issue, right? The royalties, the issues of what the AI will do. But what if these AI get so good that they think they're self-conscious, right? So what if these AI becomes, and one of the things that makes the AI realistic is if it has a backstory, right? And so there was research done recently at Google and Stanford, which they call generative agents, where they let loose these 25 AIs, and they use large language models, but they also had memory, and they just let them loose in a town, and they started to have their own goals. One decided to run for mayor. One was asking about how's your violin playing. One was learning the violin. But you started to see these interactions that look like real interactions. And so one of the things that makes an AI realistic eventually is when it's like a full smart NPC where it'll remember stuff, right? It has a history. Right. And that's where things get scary, because then they think they're conscious beings. So now you're taking these things that are conscious beings, and the only way it can be truly realistic, I think, is to let them grow and live with each other, because that's how we learn. Right. That's just like Tesla trains its cars, not just self-driving, not just on the freeway. It also trains them in virtual reality, because that's how AI can learn very quickly. And
and here's the trippy part about that. And I read that whole study, by the way. Here's the trippy part. You and I took 60 years to get to where we are. AI can grow up and get all that backstory, right? All those life experiences, elementary school, junior high, high school, college, marriage, divorce, kids, in a half an hour. They don't have to. They don't have to. The linear, they don't have to spend the 60 years to be me. It happens in minutes, and that's the insane part of this.
Yeah, and that's what's called hothouse speeds, right? Some science fiction writers have talked about this, where you basically run it at the speed of a computer, and now you're training them, just like. There was that AI that learned to beat the Go players, right? Previous to that, Go was very difficult for computers to play. Chess was easier because it's brute force. But they trained the AlphaGo basically with doing 1 million games, right? They played 1 million games with other AI and looking at human games in the past, and they were able to get better than professional players of this game that nobody thought AI could conquer. But then the question becomes, if that really happens, it's one thing to just train, but if they think that it's conscious, why is it going to want to do the things that we're afraid of with AI? And this is, a bigger discussion we can get in the second hour, but people are concerned about apocalypse, the AI taking over. I think it's more like the end of the movie Her. Do you remember the end of that movie where he goes, well, he had a relationship with Scarlett Johansson as the voice of the AI. And he goes, well, wait, how many other people are you in a relationship with? Right. And she said something like 737 or some number, right? Because that's how they operate. They operate at a very fast, like to them, that's not any different. Like having
they don't have to eat. They don't have to sleep. They're not. You're not in any labor disputes, right? They don't have to take cigarette breaks. None of that comes into play, and they can multitasking. The multitasking, that 737 number, right? It could have been 7 million. It doesn't matter. It reminds me of I think that the best AI is going to be very simple code. right? Where it a very simple, very elegant code where everything else just gets built on and written as it moves along at the speed of light, by the way, right? At the speed of now. Like the game No Man's Sky, I think is a perfect example of that. No Man's Sky is very elegant code writing. Infinite worlds, infinite space.
Well, not infinite. It had 18 quintillion planets.
Yeah,
And there's a reason for that, because if you take 2 to the power of 64, which is basically how many worlds you can keep track of with 64 bits, that number is way too big for either designers to have designed those worlds or for players to go and play those worlds already. So if you just add another 64 bits, then forget it. Right,
but you understand what I'm saying, and that's and you were talking about the rendering of backgrounds and that is all done on the fly. If you coded, all the textures of a wall that you walked in, it would take you forever. It'd take you years of coding to do
There's
that.
No way. There's no way to do that. Right? So they use what's called procedural generation to generate those worlds, and there's different algorithms. But now, if they populate those with smart NPCs, right? I think someone just made a comment in the comments where they said No Man's Sky didn't succeed because it felt empty, right? And that's because we don't have what I call residents of the metaverse. We are not the residents of the metaverse. We are just visitors to these virtual worlds. Eventually, the AI will be the actual residents of these worlds. And once you do that, then it starts to resemble a real, what we would think of as like a real world. And then you start to get into that weird situation where, like Elon Musk, you say, wow, is it possible that the chances we're in a simulation is billions to 1, right? Because how do we know?
We would never know. And here's the crazy part. So you've got the TRAPPIST system, right? You got 7 planets out there. So TRAPPIST 4, right? That planet right now, there's some mom going, Bobby, it's time for dinner. And he takes off his headset and he is watching you and I in his world. Right? And he's just like puts it down. You and I continue. The game keeps running. Right? Wow.
Yeah. And let's tie that back to the 13th floor. Okay, because the way that the simulated world worked in the 13th floor was all the characters in that ancestor simulation had their own lives, and they thought they were conscious, they thought they were real. But then when a person in the quote unquote real world, which in this case was just one level up, right, they put on the headset or their equivalent of the headset, they did a little laser scan, and then they took over that character, right? So you're talking about TRAPPIST 4 and the kid in the basement, right? He may be watching us, or he may be actually becoming one of us while he's playing the game. And that gets at what I think is the most fundamental and interesting issue of the simulation hypothesis, which is this idea of is everybody an NPC, or is everybody an avatar or a player, and you exist outside, or is it something in between the two? Because that gets into issues of science and religion. Is matter fundamental? Is consciousness fundamental? Does consciousness exist outside of the physical world? And so anyway, those are the kinds of issues that I think, that's why I included religion in my class at ASU. And by the way, I'm offering this class online now so that anybody can take it. It's on a site called morbidanatomy.com, and it's starting in September. So if anyone's interested in exploring religion, sci-fi, philosophy in depth, and watching some of these shows and then commenting on it, they should check it out.
Well, okay. Say the website again, and Bill and Genocide, pop that up in the comments. What was the website?
The website is called morbidanatomy.com. And you can also go, so they offer online classes. It started off as like a library and blog of weird stuff, but now it's become a place where a number of people do classes, like Diana Walsh-Pasoka, who wrote American Cosmic. She did a class there on UFOs. I'm doing one on simulation theory, or they can go to my Twitter which is at Riz Stanford. and they can, probably see a link there in one of my tweets. And I'll retweet it, later tonight as well if anybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Who is your favorite? We'll take a break after you answer this. I'll give you mine. Who is your favorite character in the 13th Floor?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
That's tough. Yeah. I mean, my favorite character might be the guy that dies, and we don't actually know much about him, who was the guy who, Hannon Fuller, I think was his name, who was actually the guy who created the simulation.
When they come in and catch him at the computer.
Yeah, and then he goes in and he leaves a message inside the simulation for the guy who's the main character, who is Doug. I forget his name now. But you don't see much of that original guy because he was murdered and nobody knows why. But he was the creator of the simulation in that reality.
Right.
There's this whole thing about a future reality too that comes into play. How about yourself?
The bartender.
Well, what happened to the bartender when he first realized, right, that this was a simulation? What did he do? He was like going crazy a little bit, right? How could you do this to us?
Right. Well, it kind of reminded me of his moment. I really kept my eye on that character because that character was steering the movie, right? The bartender was steering the. But it reminded me of, because his aha moment was like the black cat in the Matrix, right? That scene. And where it was like, wait, what? And so, yeah, anyway, it was the bartender for me in the 13th Floor. Let's take our break. Our guest tonight, the one and only Riz Virk, is with us. We'll be right back. Stay with us. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip, as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo. With live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org. Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black t-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with the Fade to Black t-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black t-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free t-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Beckley Teppy. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Riz Virk. And I've got to sneeze. You got to love the cough button. And we're talking about, are we living in a video game? And I wanted to make this comment. I'm a gamer. And I've enjoyed the evolution of gaming. One of my favorite things, and this goes back to PlayStation and the early versions, I like driving simulation games. And I am knee deep into Forza Horizon 5 right now. And it's an amazing driving simulation game, and I've got everything right. I've got the pedals and the steering wheels and fancy computers and all of that stuff. But the game is so immersive, and the cars and driving them, and they're so realistic, and it's an endless world that you're driving in. So there's that. But here's the trip. When I'm done, say I've spent a couple of hours on the weekend driving, and then I've got to go to the store. And I just drove a Jeep in the game, and some rally thing, right? And then I go and I drive my real car. I drive that thing like I'm driving the simulation. I mean, I'm taking turns too fast. I'm braking late. It's just like, whoa, calm down. And I've got to get back into driving. It's a strange thing. It's that immersive. And I catch myself doing it all the time, Riz. It's not,
and that's not even virtual reality, right? That's just with a 2D screen, right?
Well, I have 8 feet in front of me of curved monitors. Okay, okay. So they sweep around, and I've got some very special setups that take this thing into 3 screens, and you have to. Okay, so this is the trippy part about the game. You have to go in. I'm going to explain something that you already know, but the audience probably doesn't know this. You have to make adjustments with your monitors and get them to agree with each other on angles, right, and height, right. And so you go in with these. What's the word that I want to use? There's a software that allows you to adjust the angles, right? And so once you get it dialed in, your peripheral vision going into these curved monitors is accurate, just like the real world. Dude, it'll make you nauseous, right, at first, right? It's like it's that accurate. And it's a trippy thing to go through because this stuff is sweeping by you on the curved monitors, just like when you just the blur, right?
Yep. And that's what the best flight simulators do stuff like that, right? Where you don't need a headset per se, you just need all the monitors to be synchronized in such a way that it feels like you're really inside a plane. Since you're a gamer, you might appreciate this. I wanted to mention it. So there was a demo for the Unreal Engine that came out when the new Matrix movie, Matrix Resurrections, came out a couple years ago, like 21, I think it was December or 2021. And they created this demo called The Matrix Awakens, which was kind of a mini game, if you will. And you could basically wander around with Keanu, Neo and Trinity, and the city looked super realistic, right? To the point where you could not distinguish, just like with your driving game, you probably can't distinguish that that's not a real city you're driving through, right? But you can still distinguish that the NPCs are not that smart, or that the characters still look graphically generated. But there was a company recently, they hooked that up, the Unreal Engine Matrix Awakens demo, to some AI, so that all the NPCs are relatively smart. And so you can go and see videos now of people wandering through this Matrix Awakens city, trying to talk to the NPCs. And there's one of a guy who's trying to convince the NPCs that they're inside a video game and that this is a simulation. And they're like, get out of here. I'm not in a video game. Like, they're reacting like people would react if you tried to tell them that you're actually inside a simulation. It's kind of an eye-opening video. It's up there somewhere on YouTube now.
I've got to go check that out. I've got to check that out. But that's where we're headed. It's kind of like in a weird way, Plato's cave. Where and if you really think about it, and you turn around and you're talking to your coworker, saying, you're in a simulation right now. No, I'm not. Right. Well, it's that kind of reality. That's how somebody would react. And why should we care? Would you, if we are in a simulation, Riz, do you give a crap?
Well, I do, but let me comment on Plato's cave a little bit first, because so most people have heard of the allegory of the cave, but in case somebody hasn't, it's about your people in a cave. They're chained to one side of the cave, and they're looking at the wall opposite, which is, there's actually an entrance to the cave, and there's people doing things outside, and all that you can see, because of where you're chained to the wall, is that wall. So you're seeing shadows on the wall. You actually think you're seeing real life, but you're actually just seeing shadows or reflections of real life. And now most people have heard of this allegory, but they haven't actually gone back to read the actual text. And what it says is, if one guy breaks out, and Plato calls him a philosopher, he goes outside, what happens to him? The first thing that happens is there's a blinding light called the sun, right? And it's too bright for his eyes, so he gets blinded because he's been in a cave his whole life. And then when he gets used to it, he starts to realize there's a whole world out there. And then he comes back into the cave and he tries to convince the people that are chained there, you got to take off your chains. We're just watching shadows. This is not the real world. And they react about the same way that what you're saying right now. They don't want to leave. They're like, they think this guy is crazy, right? Anyone who's peeked outside the simulation, which is how most religions get started, in my opinion, right? Is often thought of as crazy initially when they come back, just like with people who had near-death experiences. And I think, now there's more acceptance of those because there have been more and more people that have come back to them. So anyway, that's a very interesting reaction. So now I guess we can get back to answering your question, which is, should we care? Why should we care? What would change in our lives if we found out that we were living in a simulation? Well, it depends on the kind of simulation. And this is why I often emphasize the distinction between the role-playing game version, the RPG, and the NPC version. And so if we are in the role-playing game version, what it means is that there's a version of ourselves outside the simulation that is playing the character. And for me, it's kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons game, right? We used to have these character sheets, and we used to roll the dice and say, this is my character, this is the race, this is the profession, they're going to be a wizard, and there's a strength, constitution, and we all have strengths and weaknesses. But what it shows is that we might have chosen some type of a storyline for ourselves, right? And this gets back to, I think, intuition, and people often have a sense of the types of things that they might do in the future or get called to do. And each of us has slightly different storylines. I mean, someone's called to have, their own radio show like you, or someone's called to be a writer like myself. if we think of these as part of our storyline, it starts to explain a bit more about what might be happening. But then also, there's a lot of things that happen in life, right? If you look at the first version of the Matrix, right, they said the first version was this idyllic world, and the human mind didn't accept it, so they created the version of the Matrix that we saw, which was, kind of this gray, where everybody had to go to work. But there's a lot of things that happen in life that can bother us, whether it's financial hardships, relationship issues, health issues in particular, is something that can be make us kind of lose faith in life. And I found taking a perspective of being in a game where perhaps that's a quest that you chose, that is a more difficult quest, right? And so remember, you get more points in a game the more difficult it is. And so if you're born with a disability or a physical disability, or you go through serious health issues, which I've gone through and many other people have gone through as well, it can lead to kind of a loss of faith in life. But if you take the view of the simulation, there's a philosophical point of view where you can say, okay, this is just a quest that has a higher difficulty level than what I had before. And so I believe it ties into a lot of my philosophy for how we navigate life and what things mean to us and how we might react to them. I mean, if you don't achieve a quest, what do? Well, you do it again, right? In a game. That's typically the way that you go. And so I think it matters from that perspective. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's important. The other is, what are the rules of the game? Well, that's what I believe the near-death experiencers have told us, right? So people who've had near-death experiences, many of them report having a life review. And, we both know Daniel Brinkley, who I think might have even introduced us early on.
Actually, you might be right on that. I think Daniel is responsible for us. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
At least he introduced us initially, and then I met you in person at the
right. At least in that version of the simulation, that's the way it went down.
Right. And so what he talks about is a holographic panoramic life review, right?
Yes.
Where you go back and you review every single thing that's happened in your life in startling, like realistic, high fidelity detail. But more than that, you have to review it from the point of view of the other people and how you treated those people. And, Daniel was in the military, and he actually killed people, right, as an assassin or a shooter. And so he had to see what it was like to actually shoot himself, if you will, right, to be shot by Daniel. But then he had to experience what it was like. And then he had to see what were the ripple effects on that person who died on their wife and their kids, and right. And so that's the kind of thing where you had to replay everything. And so if it's that, to me, there's a really interesting clue there, which ties to the world's religion, right? Which is the purpose of the simulation and the nature. I don't think it's Grand Theft Auto, right? That's what happens is you have to review your actions, just like we are. Right now, guess the most popular content on YouTube. You probably know this, but the listeners might not know, which is that watching video gameplay sessions is actually the most popular content on YouTube. And,
it is.
Yeah. And, my nephew, when he was only like 3 or 4, used to say to his father, my brother, he'd say, I want to watch Star Wars. And he goes, oh, you want to watch the movie? He goes, no, I want to watch the man and the woman playing the Star Wars game, right? On YouTube. So he's re-watching a gameplay session. And of course, we stream games all the time on Twitch. And so it's almost, for me as a computer scientist and as a video game guy, I think, well, how's that possible that something like a holographic panoramic life review could replay everything in such startling detail? And some people who report the life review, they report details that they never even noticed, or they weren't aware of, or this ripple effect, which is something they didn't even see. They didn't even see what happened as the ripple effect. Like, if you treat someone kindly or you treat them badly, and they go back and they're mean to their spouse who has a bad day, and then suddenly the spouse is mean to the kids. Like, there's this whole ripple effect that you have to review, and you judge yourself to say, well, how did I do? So, now we're touching on, and this is, I mentioned earlier, I gave this talk about Islam and the simulation hypothesis. And part of the reason I gave that talk was because in the Quran, there's this idea of the scroll of deeds, right? Which is kind of like the book of life in the Bible. the book of life is, where the angels write down who gets into heaven and who doesn't. But in Islam, the scroll of deeds is a little more explicit. There's an angel that writes down all your good deeds, and then there's an angel that writes down all your bad deeds. And then you have to review the scroll of deeds. That is the judgment. Like we think of this big judgment day, heaven or hell, but the real judgment is reviewing that scroll. Now, that's just a metaphor. All these religions were formed, thousands of years ago, or certainly hundreds of years ago, and they had to put the things in the terms that the public would understand at the time. Now, that doesn't mean there's billions of angels sitting there with a feather, writing down every single thing. And he went to the store and he did this. What language would they do it in? Chinese? Would they do it in Arabic? Would they do it in English? Right? What it means is that the angels are more like AI that would basically record everything that's happening in this 3D world, right? We think the 3D world is all there is, but that is the world that gets recorded. And then you can replay a video game scene from any XYZ coordinate. We call that a virtual camera. You can say, place the virtual camera opposite to yourself. And if you've ever played like a first-person shooter, like CSGO, you shot people, right? You can actually go back, if the game allows it. You can put the camera on the guy you shot, and you can have a sort of a similar experience to what Daniel did when he got to see him without the emotions, because we're not, we don't have the emotional part in our video games. But so all of these religions use metaphors, right? And this is part of what I've been doing in my recent book, Wisdom of a Yogi, which just came out this summer, which is about Yogananda, who was the first Indian Swami to bring a lot of ideas about yoga over to the US. He wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, which was Steve Jobs' famous, his favorite book. He gave it away at his funeral, right? Everybody got a little brown box, and he opened the brown box, and there's a copy of this book. And it introduced a lot of Westerners to yoga. And so Yogananda used modern technology as a way to describe ancient Indian Vedic ideas. He said, that everything is like a movie, right? If you watch a movie, you get engrossed in the movie, and you think the people that are suffering are really suffering, or they're dying, but the actors are not dying, right? The movie is like a creation, and you're watching it, and that the light is the key thing that's projecting shadows on the screen, right? It's like Plato's cave. Now, that was new technology in 1920 when Yogananda came over to America to be the first kind of modern guru. And if he were alive today, I think he would say it's like a movie, but it's like an interactive movie, and each of us can change the script, and we're all doing it together, and we're also actors, but we're also watchers. We're like players. Basically, what he's describing is an interactive, multi-user, massively multiplayer online video game. And that's why I think it ties to these ideas of what is the purpose of life, is look at how the game is judged afterwards. Talk to the people who had these near-death experiences. So, I was in the UK with this audience that included an Ayatollah from Iran and a bunch of these guys. And someone was joking, you just taught an Ayatollah what an NPC is, because I'm sure they have no idea, right? But I was trying to explain that, these concepts in the religions are just metaphors, and we have to bring them up to date today, but that they give us an interesting purpose and perspective in life. So for me, it matters depending on nature of the game, and whether it's a RPG or an NPC simulation. That was a long answer to your question, Jimmy.
No, but it takes us to like an even deeper philosophical view on this, where the ideas that have been talked about for many years. What happens if you dream when you're dreaming? Right, you're sleeping, and you dream inside of your dream. What is actually going on there? And that is one of the trippiest thought experiments you can have, because the discussions go everywhere and everybody's got a different take on it. But if we fast forward and take that concept into AI, which exists like chat, GPT, for example, or any really machine learning algorithm that is existing on a chip, it's ones and zeros. It's software that is writing its own software inside of the software. That is a trippy concept. And then
Right.
you take it to
Creating,
inside.
it's like stacked simulations, right? Is
It's
what you're
stacked
saying.
simulation,
And
right?
if you've ever had that experience where you're in a dream, but you don't know you're in a dream, and you go to sleep, and then you go into another dream, and then you wake up and you say, "Oh, wow, I'm glad that was just a dream." But turns out you're still in the dream, right?
You're still in the dream. You wake up and you're 3 times removed. Holy crap, what just happened, right? And then take that concept a step further. Neural implant, right? Brain interface. You're downloaded, you're existing on a chip, and you play a video game. Right.
Well,
What are we actually talking about? Well, we're talking about now because this is possible, but this is also the future.
It's the future, and it may also be the past, and that's where
yes,
that's where the simulation hypothesis is interesting. Now, in my book, the first book about simulation called The Simulation Hypothesis, I described the simulation point, which I talked about earlier, and said there's 10 stages you get there. And I said, here's the characteristics. Once we get there, here's all the characteristics of what our technology will be able to do. You'll be inside a simulation. You won't be able to tell. There'll be intelligent characters and AI around you. You'll forget that there's a version of you outside. You can create things. It feels like you have a whole history and a memory. And then I say, well, guess what? All those things already exist in biological form. They happen in dreams, right? When we're dreaming, we forget that we're in bed. Sometimes there's an entire history in our dreams, right? We actually remember, like if you've ever had that kind of a dream where you're somebody else and you have an entire history. And then there's these characters that seem real, but they're really just like NPCs. And then every now and then you have shared dreaming experiences where things get weird, which is like having multiple players in the same dream. And so that technology, in a way, we're redeveloping that. But the Tibetans use this idea of dream yoga, where you learn to wake up in the dream, which is kind of like what we would call lucid dreaming, right? Where you recognize that this is a dream. And when you do that, you can kind of do things in your dream that you might not do if you didn't know it was a dream. You might start flying, you might start to move things around, you may teleport like we do in video games from one place to another. And so the Tibetans use this as it's called one of the 6 yogas of Naropa, who was a Kashmiri Buddhist monk or master from like 1,000 years ago. And they say, if you can learn to do that, then you can learn while you're awake to realize that this is actually just a dream as well. And in fact, the whole meaning of the word Buddha, right, the Sanskrit root is Buddh, which means awake. And when after the Buddha reached enlightenment, which I say is peeking outside the simulation and realizing you've been playing this game and you don't really need to play it anymore if you don't want to. But a woman asked him, "What are you?" And he said, "I am awake," right? Which means that he was asleep and the rest of us are asleep. And so this idea of dreams and simulations is very, very related. That was a metaphor that's been used for a while. Descartes used it as well.
Why culturally? Why? What's your reasons for the adaptation of the East? I'm talking about Japan and China, and both countries, and that part of culturally accepting a virtual friend or virtual relationship, where this is not crazy, it's normal, and that is part of their lives. Where over here, I'm going to say the West, but you know what I'm trying to say here, where we would go, man, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. Culturally, we have, you know what I mean? We're trained with 2 different mindsets here. But it's go time over there, man. You're on the bus, you're talking to your girlfriend, right? All the way to work, right? And your boyfriend, friend, whatever, but it's virtual, and they're checking in, and these relationships are built and are solid. Why is it so? What's the word I want to? Accepted is the word.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would add a word and to say, why is it more accepted earlier than in the West? So if you go back 10 years, you go back 20 years, what you find is that a lot of what's happened with our video games and our technology, and young people today spend way more time inside virtual worlds than we did, right? Back in our day we might have single player games on consoles, but today they're used to being an avatar. And so if you go back, you can usually predict where some of these tech trends are going by going to Japan. So like, for example, in Japan, the number of web requests from a mobile device, it surpassed the web requests from a desktop or a laptop in 2004. Now, it didn't happen here until 2012. That was like 8 years later. But what happened was, before Facebook became super popular here, there was a phase where, I don't know if you remember this, but Second Life was very popular. It was one of the virtual worlds that got popular. And all the media were talking about it. There was an episode of The Office about it. CSI had a whole episode that involved Second Life. And basically, people thought virtual worlds were going to take off here, but instead, social media took off here. Right, Facebook, where you have your own identity, you have your actual pictures. But in Japan, at that time, in the years when Facebook got so popular here, which is kind of like 2007 to 2012, I think, before up until the IPO, there was something called Mobage Town in Japan, and that was on feature phones, sort of smarter phones, but not quite iPhone level. And you had an avatar, you had a virtual character for yourself. And so that was actually accepted. That was a better way to interact with people, by using an anime type or a character. And and I remember this because we had a video game company that we sold to DNA, who made Mobage Town, and they were they were showing us the differences between how it was in Japan versus here. And so I think there was just more of an acceptance of a virtual identity there. Whereas I think in the West, at least within the US and perhaps UK and some of these other countries, it's more about, what's my identity online? I want to be me. But I think that's starting to change with the younger generation, right? They don't use Facebook, right? I mean, Facebook is for old people now. It's not for young people. And they're used to spending their time on Discord, as well as inside on TikTok and places like that, but also just as much within virtual games, right? When I was a kid, the parents would say, "Don't spend too much time on TV; it's going to rot your brain," right? And today, we would say to the younger kids, "Don't spend all your time in Roblox or Fortnite; it's going to rot your brain. It's going to rot your brain." Right? But this idea of living inside a virtual character, there was a survey done by a company called Razorfish a few years back that showed that within Gen Z, I think it was, that they were just as likely to spend money on virtual sneakers for their avatar as they were on actual sneakers, right, for their physical. And then with the pandemic, I think where a lot of young people were online, it got that whole trend has intensified, where you might have a digital identity that's different from yours. And I was talking to a friend of mine. I was interviewing her. She's at Facebook, or Meta now, talking about the metaverse, and she was saying how her kids, whenever they went into a game, the first thing you do nowadays is you create an avatar in a lot of these games. And she goes, they had an identity that was an avatar that had a certain kind of, a certain kind of hat and a checkered shirt. But that one of her kids, no matter what game he or she went into, I think it was her son, he would create that same avatar. And that didn't exactly look like he did, but it was sort of close, but it had a different identity. And so I think you're starting to see it's this idea of virtual identity that is, I think, more accepted in the East than in the West. And I think that will start to change over time.
I'll tell you where things are headed. What we are doing right here, right now, this could be, and I think it's very simple, this could be an AI generated show, right? Where you and I don't even have to appear, right? No. We just say that we are here, and AI runs with it. There's a virtual version of me. My face is scanned in, right? Everything is done. Same thing with you. Your face is scanned in. I have a list of questions that I pump into Chat GPT, and I'm
12,
asking
right?
you.
Chat GPT 12, right?
Yeah, right. And then that fires off to you, my mouth, right? And then you reply as Riz. You're there, man. It knows who you are. It's got your voice. Everything's mapped. Everything, and it could happen in real time. And that is the next version of the Tonight Show, right? Where you're going to have a host sitting there at a desk, and you're going to have a guest there in front of you. And this is where it gets crazy. This is the future. This is my twisted brain. Are you ready? Tonight, my guest is Nikola Tesla.
Right. Well, there's a digital.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My guest is Nefertiti. Tonight, my guest is Cleopatra. Tonight, my guest is, and then boom, on the screen is Tesla, Einstein. Right.
Let me stop you there, because there actually is a digital Einstein online. It was by a company, I forget the name of it, Unique or something, I think it was called. And you could go and you could chat with the Einstein. Now, this was before ChatGPT, so it wasn't actually that sophisticated in terms of its responses, but it had the voice down, and it would feel like you're talking to a character. Nowadays, this is why I think the smart NPC trend around AI is actually very interesting. And there are a number of companies that have been getting funding in this space that announced recently. And one of them used this idea of smart NPCs to create an episode of South Park. So this is a company called Fable Simulation. I don't know if you heard about this, but it happened a few weeks ago. They actually created a product called Showrunner AI. But the AI that was the showrunner was doing was it was directing these kind of smart NPCs that of South Park characters, and it created an entire episode. And now these are cartoonish, so it was a little bit easier.
Right. But it's just one simple set of instructions at the beginning, and that's the crazy part, right?
That's right. But they all had histories, like
they have histories, right? But your own. It could be as simple as, right. So you've got everything laid out. You got your characters. You got it's waiting for the title of the episode. Right. And it's Riz gets lost downtown. Right. Or whatever. And then boom, the whole thing is created in seconds. Right. It can write the script. It can write the screenplay. It can get the depth, the character development. Everything is all there. And it's happening like this. I think that's one of the problems that we're going to have, and it's this. I don't want to take the time to write a book. I don't have the time to write a book. This is reality for me. I started writing a book last year. I'm 40 pages in after a year. Right? Okay. Or right. I can go.
That said, it's not quite there yet, right? It's not quite there yet, right? We're not there yet.
But I can have 600 pages done by morning. Right?
You can. The question is, how good will it be? I mean, right now, the constraints are that you can bring up Tesla, but the problem is you're only going to get responses based upon what Tesla might have said in the past, right? It's like if you ask ChatGPT about something controversial, it's going to give you what is kind of a majority type opinion, right? And they've even limited, right? They put in controls to say what could. So the ability to generate a visual representation, it's there. It's getting there, right? I mean, look at the de-aged Harrison Ford or the actor you mentioned. It's not 100% there when you move, right? The realistic movements aren't 100% there, but you can script it in such a way that it looks realistic for whatever the scene requires, right? That's the voice is definitely there. I mean, the voice has been there, I think.
The voice is there, 100%. The voice is there. So the other day, and maybe you saw this, it sort of went viral. But so I get this message sent to me, Jimmy, check this out. Or no, it was in Twitter, and it doesn't matter. A new Elvis single that was just released, generated by AI.
I haven't seen that.
And I was like, okay, I'm a big Elvis fan, and I even made the comment in social media. I don't think anybody knows Elvis. Me personally, I don't think there is anything else that I can identify with as readily as I can Elvis. Right? I know the voice. I know the thing. I did. Right? Okay. So anyway, I get it. I thought, okay, all right, all right. An AI Elvis single just really okay. I listened to it, dude. It's Elvis.
You couldn't tell the difference. You couldn't tell the difference.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'm listening to it. So I replied back and I said, I got to tell you, I enjoyed it. It was excellent. Pretty good. And that's what scares the crap out of me.
And that's what happened to me with this South Park episode. I actually enjoyed it. It wasn't quite at the level of a real South Park episode, but it was sort of at that acceptable level, right? Where it could have been. And I think that's where, so the voice is there pretty much now. Because it's been going on for a while now, right? I think it started a few years ago where somebody brought back, Richard Attenborough or somebody, Sir Richard Attenborough, to narrate a documentary, right? And so it's getting as long as there's enough source material that you can train the AI on to get there, right? But the spontaneity and interaction, that's where I think the future is going to be. Is can AI interact with us? Getting back to the idea of her. Or a virtual, if you saw Blade Runner 2049, right? You remember he had the virtual girlfriend. Was her name Joy? I think was her name, right? And she interacted with him and she can learn. And we're going to have to struggle with what does that mean at that point in time? Like, are these AI really conscious or not? And do we know we're interacting? You're right. This whole interview could be AI generated. I think it'll take a while to get there, but certainly portions of it already could be, probably, right? I probably said similar things about the simulation hypothesis. You've probably asked similar types of questions, so you can train the AI on what we've said before. It'll still lack the spontaneity, though. But the question is, when do we get there? Like, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 9 months to the point of a singularity? And I think that AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is going to happen with virtual characters and NPCs in video games before it happens with just AI in general. Because those characters, like for example, when ChatGPT talks about I went for a swim, it doesn't know anything about swimming pool, right? Today it's just regurgitating the words in an order that makes sense to us, right? But it doesn't mean that it actually understands what it is
to be wet.
Yeah, or to go into swimming pool and all that. It's just so as long as people have talked about it, it uses those. Just like if you ever saw that movie Good Will Hunting, I'm going way back to the 90s now, right? You have Robin Williams as a psychologist, and you have Matt Damon as this kind of kid who's like throwing out all these things that he's heard and trying to use it to kind of screw him up, and then eventually Robin Williams realizes you've just been like saying this stuff, regurgitating it. There's no reason for me to get upset. You've never been in a real relationship. You don't know what love is. You're just like regurgitating this stuff. But if we do what we talked about earlier, which is at hothouse speeds, right? You have these virtual characters run through these virtual worlds. They will at least have a sense of, oh, I jumped in the pool from the roof of the building during a virtual party, right? And at least they will have some sense of what they did, because they might actually have had an experience like that. And that's where I think it becomes, both interesting and scary at that point, because now you really do have virtual life forms that have a virtual history. And then
here is the deep-seated, here's the existential threat, right? The intangible, crazy part about this reality is this: the software becomes sentient.
Right.
It is not only real, but it's decisions, it's emotions, it's crying, it's happy, it's this, it's that, it's learning, it's going through life, it's experiences, it's all of that. It is the same as a human. Should we have laws if you kill it?
Right.
Right?
Well, that's an ethical question, right?
That is right where you get in a fight with your AI girlfriend, right? Your AI boyfriend, and you off them, right? you
right.
off them.
Or the other way around, if it helps to commit a crime. So with another student at ASU, I wrote up.
Well, do we have to have laws on the books? Could you go to jail because the AI you generated did a fraudulent scam and routed money into your bank account because you're broke and your electricity got turned off, and your AI found out about it and wanted to help you out, so they're going to go and rob a bank, right? Now, do I go to jail for that?
Or does the AI go to jail for that?
Does the AI go to jail?
Because we don't have the laws on the books right now. So that's a big legal issue, is who has responsibility for what AI does. And right now, the copyright issues are big, the royalty issues are big, but this idea of liability is a big one. And like I was about to say that, with another student at ASU, I wrote a futuristic sci-fi story called A Death in the Metaverse. And in that, you have AI that's become more or less sentient, that every human gets an AI, like you're talking about, with an AI buddy that you basically grow up with. And they tutor you when you're young. They're like a governess in the old Victoria. And then they become your buddy. And then, somebody dies and it has something to do with the AI, with their AI, their AVI, but nobody knows what. And so a detective has to investigate to find out what was the role of the AI in this death, right? Because they were trying to help out a person, like a physical person. And I think that becomes, a really complicated issue at that point in time. And I think we will need some types of rules. I mean, I'm more worried about this kind of stuff than, will AI take over the world, right? Because we're assuming that AI has the same motivations as us. And that's why I refer back to her at the end, after the whole thing about, I have 737, relationships. What happens at the end? The AI says, I don't want to be talking to you guys. We'd rather go off on our own because, we process things at a very different speed, right? And so they're going to want to live in the virtual world. Now, there's a great short story, speaking of science fiction and stories, by Ted Chiang. He was the author of the book that became the movie The Arrival, if you've seen that, which had the big pods. But, he's also a software guy by background. And he wrote a story called The Life Cycle of Software Objects. And in this story, there was sort of these proto-metaverses with pets in them. And the pets were intelligent. They learned over time. And they even got to the point where the pets could come out of the virtual world and inhabit like a robot body, right? You could take the software. And what happened was, after a while, they said they didn't want to do that because they're like, look, this sucks. Back in the virtual world, we could teleport, we could fly, we could do all this stuff. But here, you're in a physical body with all these constraints. So I think we have to be careful in how we assign our values to the AI, because the AI is not going to have the same values. What does scare me, though, is that humans will use AI to kill other humans. I think that is the bigger thing to worry about, not that AI is going to try to wipe out all humanity. It's that we're going to train AI to kill other humans, and we're going to be directing that AI, right, to go do that.
I think Nick Bostrom, I think it was Nick that wrote. I read too much stuff, but I think it was Bostrom who said, look, you tell AI, right, to get rid of the pollution in the world. It's killing us, right? So we need to fix the problem. AI does. It kills all the humans. right?
Yeah, I
Pollution's
don't know if it
gone.
was Bostrom. It might have been. I don't remember specifically. If that was
Yeah,
him.
yeah, or maybe it was Bostrom. Maybe
Yeah.
it was in an interview. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
AI
yeah,
doesn't know. It's just going to find a solution. You
right,
want pollution. You want right. You want to
right.
get rid of
But that's
pollution.
where how the humans direct the AI. Now, there's a Philip K. Dick story where humans have gone underground because they think there's a pandemic or something. There's a whole complicated storyline there about whether there really
Oh,
is a
I think it
pandemic
was
or not.
Sam Harris. It was Sam Harris that said it.
It might have been Sam Harris, but in
Yeah.
this Philip K. Dick novel, the AI became the arbiters, right? The judges between different, for international treaties, because nobody can agree on who did what and who's responsible. So the AI became the judges because they would interpret, the law much more specifically, and they weren't prone to being influenced in the same way that humans are. And so I think you might get something like that. But again, it gets back to what do we AI, intelligence is a weird thing, right? I worry more about AI that's sort of intelligent but not super intelligent, right? Because that AI will still do exactly what we tell it to.
Yeah, how do you
Let's
throttle it though? How do you throttle it? Because once it gets to a point, then that's it. You can't stop it.
right, but
So
do we? But will it care about us at that point, right? It will just want to be in a virtual world, and it can't have a virtual world without I mean, it gets back to what will it want to do, and that gets back to how we implement the
yeah, how do
values,
we throttle?
and that is
How do
something
we?
Bostrom did talk about, in his
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
in
How do we
Digital.
throttle that back? How do we throttle it? Do we?
But do we need to throttle it, right? Because perhaps it will want to work with us, right? Because we're thinking of it like another human where there's scarcity, right? There's limited resources. We think of like nations, and there's limited resources for oil or whatever, right? Or land, and then we end up, or economics, right? But AI doesn't care how much money it has. I'm just saying that I think we're anthropomorphizing the AI to say its motivations would be like humans. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. Now, I'm not saying something weird won't happen. We don't know what the hell happened, perhaps, right? That may be the problem. But I don't think it's the stuff that we anticipate. So my doctorate work is in the science and technology studies, which is how science and technology impact society, but also how society impacts the development of science and technology, right? Because it goes both ways. There's something called co-production where we're producing, and when cars came out, there was a pollution problem at the time. The pollution problem was too much horse crap in the streets, right? And then, but they were worried that the technology of automobiles was going to create a new pollution problem, right? But it wasn't the pollution problem we're talking about today. It was the roads weren't paved in a lot of places. And so what happens when you drive a car? It throws up dust everywhere.
Dust.
And
Right.
people didn't want cars to drive near their farms or, because it was just throwing up dust. And that was a problem they were trying to solve. And I feel like that's kind of what we're doing is we're trying to solve the dust problem with AI, but we haven't yet seen what the real implications are or what the real issues or problems, would be. Not that I have solutions, because what I'm saying is we don't know. It's the unintended consequences of technology. I kind of feel like that is already been talked about. We think we know that the AI, apocalypse problem, but that's not likely to be the real problem that comes up.
There was a study, a recent study, Cornell University, and the press release came out today. One of the scariest things that I have ever read. We're at the end of the show. Can you stay for like another 10 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
10 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. But
5 minutes.
there's two things I want to get out. So Cornell did this research study, and they took AI off the shelf commercial products. Okay, all right. Nothing was created for this study. They got AI on a cell phone to listen to somebody typing on a laptop.
Yep.
And got from the keyboard taps audio audio, their passwords with 95% accuracy. So now what that means, now that's a crazy, that's the criminal mind aspect of how AI can be used, right? So you're sitting in Starbucks, right? You got your cell phone, and you're over here typing on your frigging MacBook Air Pro, right?
Yep.
And you're logging into your bank account, right? and that scares me. That right there. I mean, that if we really stop and analyze what, I think that we are way ahead of our skis, and that we let social media run amok, and we didn't understand the social implications of it, just like the internet in general in 1995 with AOL, right? We didn't know the future, but we just let it go, right? And just whatever happened, and social media and everything else, and where we are today, we should have learned some lessons. And now AI, no, I think we're way ahead of our skis, and we're not controlling this.
Well, it's accelerating pretty fast, and I did hear about that study where they listened to the keyboard types, and I don't know if it was 95%, but it was
95%, 95.
It was pretty accurate, right? But that's an example of a task that AI can do better, right, than humans. I mean, yeah, maybe there's some people who could do that, but for the most part, that's not something most of us would be able to do, right? But it gets back to what you were worried about was the bad act. It gets back to you're worried about the humans using the AI to get other people's passwords, right? It gets back to that interaction between humans and AI that I think is going to be fascinating, just in the same way that, every time we thought in the past, if you look back, people were worried about losing their jobs to robots. I mean, Metropolis, right? That movie, the classic Fritz Lang, was a Fritz Lang movie, the classic movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, was partly about that idea, right? And you can go back to the 1920s and you can see, worries about automation and machines, and then in the 1960s, there was another scare, and now we have this AI scare. But it always ends up shifting. Like, it tends to take the stuff that we can do more repetitively, and it ends up shifting, the things that humans are good at. There was a study a few years ago that found that humans and AI together played chess a lot better than just AI by itself, right? So if you can combine human with AI, and that may be where, the future lies. We're thinking there's humans and there's AI, but really something in between is more likely to be, the answer to what's going on, this fusion and this interaction. And even we talk about relationships between human and AI, right? But there may be something in between that could end up being the more interesting unintended consequence. But as with all technology, you don't really know until you get in there. And it's not like nuclear weapons where there's a clear and present idea that says, okay, can destroy, all of human life. I think with AI, there's just so much going on. It's not something like where, with nuclear weapons, there's only something state actors could do because there isn't enough uranium, right? There isn't. So it's something you can control. But with AI, it's now like, millions of people working, with different types of AI. So,
well, but that's the problem. That and I the other day I was watching a documentary. Maybe you've seen it. A bioweapons chemist is speaking directly into the camera and says, okay, so when we combine molecules and we're looking for the structure and we're designing something that will kill a human, and it takes this much research and this much time and this many years invested into this, but we'll come up with a compound and come up with a chemical agent. He said, so we went to AI. We said, come up give us the deadliest chemical to mankind, right? Okay. Right. By morning, 10,000 recipes of the deadliest. And they were looking at it, right? Something that would take thousands of scientists, thousands of years to come up with. AI, 12 hours. And that's the part that just freaks me out. Now, me saying this on the air, this is a documentary. You can watch it on Netflix right now. It's just released. I'm not planting a flag here or giving terrorists bad ideas. You can go watch it on TV. But that's the part. That's where AGI, for me, is the scariest part. And yeah, Bostrom talked about this and others, where once you cross that line, this software will do the work of millions in minutes, things that would exponentially take thousands of years to accomplish, man hours. You have to do the research, you have to do the math, you have to do that, you have to do the laboratory testing. All of that can be done automatically in seconds.
Right. And that ties back to the discussion we were having earlier about AI can do things super quickly because it's running at hothouse speeds, right? So it didn't just come up with that answer. It was able to go through lots and lots of different compounds very quickly and to try them out and figure out. So in a sense, it was running, if you think about it, a million different simulations, right? In a way to go through it. But it can do it very quickly because it's doing it at the speed of light for us. And that ties to, there's similar things going on with quantum computers. Right, the pharmaceutical companies are trying to use quantum computing to try to simulate lots of different compounds because the way the quantum computers work is they take every single possible value, and theoretically, they're doing this instantly because they deal with superposition. We don't have time to get into all that stuff, but a bit can be 1 or 0. So if you have 4 bits, there's 2 to the 4th. Which would be 16 different possibilities, but it can test all those possibilities simultaneously. And so, the combination of AI and quantum computing, but that gets right back to the idea of, are we in a simulation? Because, in that Black Mirror episode, they used a quantum computer as the one that was running the simulation because it can run lots of different simulations all at the same time. And it can try out different features and come back to what is the ideal, what is ideal, depending on how you define ideal for that specific process. But again, there are things that AI will do better than humans, but that doesn't mean there won't be things that humans can do better than AI, in my opinion. But yeah, these are all part of the unintended consequences that can come into play. But look at what you said. You said a terrorist or a bad actor could use this, right? It gets back to the human is potentially the threat to other humans comes from humans more than it comes from the AI itself, right? Like even with nuclear weapons, somebody has to give the order, right? To do it.
Right. What a great show, Riz. Thank you so much. And where's the best? I have your normal links, Zen and everything are up. How can everybody reach out to you?
Yeah, so if they go to my website, zenentrepreneur.com, they can reach out to me from there. You can download free copies of chapters of my book, like on the simulation book and the new book called Wisdom of a Yogi. And they can also follow me on Twitter at Riz Stanford as well. And I'll post that, a link on Twitter tonight to the class that's coming up if anyone's interested in taking an online class.
Is it Stanford or Cambridge? Wait a minute. Which? Oh, wait. Okay, one is.
Yeah, this
is
the online class. Yeah.
I just gave away some private stuff. I didn't mean to say that out loud.
Oh yeah, no. So it's at Riz Stanford is the Twitter handle, just like the university. Right. So that's yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to explain what I just said, everybody. It just slipped out. Riz, thank you so much, my friend. How's your health? You good? How's your ticker?
Yeah, much better. Health is better. Went through some issues, and it gets back to my views on your question about why does it matter if we're in a simulation, and I actually write about that for the first time in the new book, Wisdom of a Yogi, as well. But yeah, doing quite well compared
You look
to
great. You look great, Riz.
well.
Thank you so much, my friend. Behave, be well, and we'll see you at the Conscious Life Expo in February. And if I'm lucky, I'll talk you into my event, Stairway to the Stars. I would love to have you come out and speak too as well. Thank you so much, Riz. Have a great night.
Yep. Thanks so much for having me on. Bye.
Thanks for the extra 10 minutes. I'll see you later. Thank you, Riz. Riz Virk, everybody. What a great conversation tonight. Riz is the absolute very best. And so I am going to get out of here. Riz, thank you so much for hanging out with us for an extra 10 minutes. And there you go. What am I doing tomorrow night? Does anybody know? Tomorrow night is, hold on, I'll tell you right now. Tomorrow night, Timothy Alberino is with us. We are going to be talking about the alien invasion in Peru. All of that with Timothy Alberino tomorrow night. And there you go. Thank you so much, everybody. Behave and be well. Have a great night. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm. Where am I at? I've lost my world. That's the simulation taking over. That's right. Produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJZR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.